We're live. ABC Teens presents What is Mental Health with Diksha. Thank you so much for being here. Diksha is going to be attending University of Houston and majoring in political science. She's someone who has dealt with depression and anxiety, and she hopes to create more safe places for people to find resources and discuss openly. And today she will be sharing with us more about what mental health is and trying to break the stigma around it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So let me go ahead and screen share. There we go. So, hi everyone. My name is Diksha Krishna, and today we'll be discussing what is mental health. So as Shravri said before, I am someone who was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And I actually was diagnosed in early 2020. So I had to deal with it through COVID-19 and everything. And throughout that process, it did dawn on me that there weren't as many open spaces for discussion or an easy way to gain resources. And that today is the goal, to have an open discussion and to just know more about what mental health is and to gain resources to help other people. So today we'll be talking about 4 different objectives. One will be mental illness versus mental health, learning the ins and outs of both. The second objective will be breaking stigma. Why is there stigma around mental health, and how can we as a community work towards breaking that stigma? The third objective will be learning some healthy tips, some ways that we can help out our mental health or our mental illness. And finally, resources. Discovering resources that will help us in our mental health journey throughout this entire process. So our first objective, mental health versus mental illness. What exactly is the difference? So mental health encompasses our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It influences cognition, perception, and behavior. It also determines how an individual handles stress, interpersonal relationship, and decision-making. So with mental health, you can have periods of low mental health or periods of high mental health. It is simply just your emotional well-being at the time. Some causes of low mental health can be stress, which can lead to other habits that increase our chance of developing a mental illness. Poor eating habits. These habits can lead to fatigue and an increased chance of depression. Lack of sleep. A disruption in one's sleep cycle can actually cause a lack of concentration and heightened anxiety. And substance abuse. The usage of drugs or alcohol, such as marijuana, or hard drugs, such as cocaine or heroin. All these causes inevitably can lead someone to have poor mental health, which in turn can actually lead to someone developing mental illness. Now, these are just 4 causes that are listed here, but there are a multitude of causes out there that can cause someone to have a dip in their mental health. Now, mental illness. The Mayo Clinic defines mental illness as a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Different from mental health, mental illness is a diagnosed condition that someone can have. Similar to how you can have a physical illness, such as diabetes, thyroid issues, or cancer. Mental illness is a diagnosed condition pertaining to what happens in your brain. Now, some of the causes for developing a mental illness can be early adverse life experiences, such as trauma or a history of abuse, experiences related to ongoing chronic medical conditions, such as cancer or diabetes, biological factors or chemical imbalances in the brain, use of alcohol or drugs, and having feelings of loneliness or isolation. Now, again, these are just a couple causes that are listed. There are a multitude of causes out there that can cause someone to develop a mental illness. Now, some global statistics. 1 in 7 of the world's adolescents have a mental disorder. 700,000 people die by suicide annually around the world. 284 million people around the world suffer from anxiety. Anxiety is actually one of the leading diagnosed mental illnesses. The median life expectancy of someone who has a mental illness is 10 years lower. Basically, what this means is that people who are diagnosed with a mental illness, whether that be depression or schizophrenia or any other type of mental illness, will have a lower, will pass away earlier, or at least 10 years earlier than the general population. 16 million people around the world suffer from eating disorders. The most common ones that we hear about every day are anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. And finally, globally, mental illness actually affects females more than it does males. Overall, 970 million people suffer from depression globally. Now, some common disorders that fall under the mental illness category will be anxiety, which is persistent worry or stress that interferes with one's life. Depression, which is profound sadness and can also have symptoms of fatigue and low mood. Substance use disorders, such as the frequent use of alcohol and drugs. Bipolar disorder, which is categorized as having depressive or low moods or manic high moods that can last weeks long. Schizophrenia, a chronic and severe mental disorder that affects a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Eating disorders, illnesses that affect a person's relationship with food and body image. Like I was talking earlier, the most common ones you'll find are anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder, or otherwise known as OCD. A person experiences unreasonable, uncontrollable, and recurring thoughts followed by a behavioral response. And finally, post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, a disorder that develops in some who have experienced a shocking or dangerous event and have difficulty recovering from the trauma that the event caused. Now, PTSD can develop at any time in a person's life, and it can be from childhood trauma or even adult trauma. Commonly, PTSD develops in war veterans or people who have served because of the trauma that they've experienced during their service. Oftentimes, when they come back home, they end up developing PTSD as a response to the trauma that they witnessed or went through. Overall, the difference between mental health and mental illness. The term mental health and mental illness are sometimes interchanged, but they differ in meaning. While mental health refers to anyone's state of mental, emotional well-being, mental illnesses are diagnosed conditions that affect thoughts and behaviors. Now, objective 2, breaking the stigma. Why is there a stigma around mental health and mental illness? Well, there's 3 main reasons as to why the stigma exists. First is understanding. Oftentimes, people lack understanding about mental illnesses due to misinformation that they might find on not so credible sources or on social media. Second is attitudes. Many people have a negative attitude towards those who struggle with mental illness or poor mental health. Once again, this stems from a lack of understanding and a lack of good resources that truly explain what mental health and mental illness are. And finally, discrimination. People who suffer from mental illness and poor mental health have reported facing discrimination. Some global statistics. About 88% of people who have mental illnesses have faced some sort of discrimination, whether that be in the form of workplace discrimination or at home and by their peers. 74% of people say discrimination against mental illness hasn't improved. 84% of people are scared of being stigmatized for their mental illness or their poor mental health. This often leads to people, again, not having open discussions about their feelings and causing people to compartmentalize their feelings and not feel like they have an opportunity to talk about how they feel. Around 15% of people believe that mental illness is a burden. 16% of people believe that mental illnesses can cause someone to be more violent, even though there's no statistical proof to back this up. And finally, impact. The most impacted are young people, minorities, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Now, while I was doing my research, I found this quote and I thought it really spoke to the idea of breaking the taboo around mental health and creating better discussion spaces for everyone. Now, this quote is by Russell Wilson, and it says, "If we start being honest about our pain, our anger, and our shortcomings, instead of pretending they don't exist, then maybe we'll leave the world a better place than we found it." Now, objective 3, some healthy tips. What are some healthy tips that people can use? So throughout my research, I found these 4 healthy tips that can help people with their symptoms when they're dealing with low periods of mental health or their mental illness. So the first one is physical activity. Physical activity actually allows the brain to release endorphins and other chemicals that enhance one's well-being. So when you have an increased amount of physical activity done, then you're actually allowing your brain to release the chemicals that will make you feel more happy. Next is proper diet, which improves the gut-brain axis, thus increasing chemicals such as dopamine and serotonin. So the gut-brain axis is the relationship between your gut and your brain. If you're putting bad stuff into your stomach, then it's sending signals to your brain that are equally as negative. Whereas if you're going to put good things in your stomach, then it's going to send back signals to your brain that are equally as good. So if you're eating healthy and you have the proper diet, it's sending the signals to your brain to increase the amount of dopamine and serotonin, which are the happy chemicals in your brain, thus once again allowing you to feel more happy. Next would be meditation. Meditation improves self-esteem, lowers levels of anxiety, and fosters kindness. Meditation has been proven time and time again to truly help with people connect with themselves and decrease their levels of anxiety. And finally, medication. While medication might not be the answer to all types of mental illnesses, for mental illnesses that are extreme, such as schizophrenia, where you might feel symptoms of hallucinations or hearing voices, having some type of medication can help regulate your symptoms and allow you to feel more happy or have a better quality of life. And finally, some resources. There are resources out there for everyone. So the first resource is the National Suicide Hotline. You can call or text 800-273-8255 and they will respond to you immediately. If you're feeling suicidal or depressed and need urgent care or urgent help, this is your best bet. Next would be BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online therapy site which allows you to find licensed and accredited therapists and have video chats with them to get a therapy session, or even through text if you're not comfortable with a video chat. Next is the American Psychologists Association. This allows people to find accredited psychologists and licensed psychologists that can help them with their problems that are in their area. And finally, a helpline, the disaster helpline. You can call or text 800-985-5990. Similar to the National Suicide Hotline, if you're feeling any feelings of depression or suicide, you can call this helpline and they will be there to assist you. So those are all the resources and the presentation for today. If you have any more things you want to check out, you can check out Early Birds Club's Teens. The Instagram is Early Birds Teens, the Twitter is Early Birds Teens, and the website is earlybirdsclub.org. And there's a bunch of resources on the website as well that people can check out. And thank you. So if y'all have any questions or any pointers that y'all want to say, you guys can go ahead.
So I had a question. I know that a lot of people aren't very open to the idea of mental health, and a lot of people just don't want to listen to it. So how can we create more conversations around it? How can we get people to understand the importance of it, especially for people that just don't believe in it?
I think the first part comes from educating. A lot of people don't have any understanding or belief in something simply because they're not educated in what goes around it. Oftentimes because of the media or in other ways in movies and stuff, mental health is portrayed as bad, even though inherently it's just a problem or a situation that someone's going through. So I think in the end, educating people about what mental health really is, what a mental illness really is, and then describing the symptoms and honestly equating it to a physical illness or low physical health that someone might have, I think would be the best way of going about explaining people and making them understand what exactly mental health is.
Thank you. Another question I have, I think you touched upon it a little bit, but suppose like me or anybody else who's watching, if we know someone who is going through mental illness or just someone who's, having a period of bad mental health, what should we do and what can we do to help them?
Well, if it's any extreme case, such as someone who's feeling suicidal or someone who is saying they want to carry out with suicide or something like that, then you can still reach out to the hotline and the helpline. Both help people in helping others who are feeling these suicidal thoughts. And if it's something as someone who's feeling a low period of mental health, just having an open line of communication with them. The biggest reason that a lot of times people compartmentalize their feelings and not talk about it is because there is no open line of communication and there is no space that they feel that they are comfortable enough to talk in. So creating that space for people who are feeling those low periods of mental health or have a mental illness and giving them the space to just talk freely would be the best way of going around about helping someone.
Thank you. And I think the last question that we have is you did talk about how females are more likely to be prone to all sorts of mental illnesses in comparison to men. And you also talked about how this is same when you look at minorities or the LGBTQ plus community. So do you think these differences, like maybe for women, come from postpartum depression and their hormonal changes, and maybe just the fact that minorities and all these people are more likely to face mental illness? Do you think that comes somewhere because of the discrimination they face as a society?
Yes, for sure. I do think that a huge reason that these marginalized groups have a higher rate of depression or other mental illnesses is because of the discrimination that they face. And oftentimes, these groups are also told that what they're feeling is just the norm, even though it isn't, and that they should have resources that are never given to them. So I do think because of discrimination and because of stereotypes and expectations that people have, many of these marginalized groups never get the resources that they need to deal with their mental health or their mental illness.
Thank you so much for sharing this valuable information with us. We really appreciate it. The PowerPoint was really pretty. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really fun and